All right, everyone, we are going to start working on one of our ASE task sheets. Very simple one. We're going to go over some scan tools, or at least the basics of scan tools, and how to hook one up to a car, get a trouble code, and a little bit about just the basics of what that means. And there's a lot to this subject. So again, this is just to familiarize you with the tool and with the vehicle and how we would go about getting those trouble codes. So you might be wondering, okay, well, that's great. What kind of vehicle? Well, have I got a beauty for you today? We're going to be looking at a Ford here. This is a top of the line Ford the school has acquired. And I'm joking if you can't hear my sarcasm in that. This vehicle right here is none only than the Ford Freestyle, and it does indeed have a check engine light illuminated on the dash. Just a quick note, these worksheets have to be filled out in their entirety. So make sure that you download it to your computer. Do not fill it out on an internet browser. You will lose the information. You need to save it to your PC. Then open it and you can fill out these light blue spots. And yes, you need to have your name and the date and the make, model, and year of the vehicle, the VIN, and you need to keep track of how much time it takes you so that you can fill it out. So hopefully, I just want to make that clear, because if it's not done in its entirety, it'll be sent back to you for it to be completed for a grade. There are multiple places to find the VIN number on a vehicle. On this particular Ford, it was right inside the driver's door jamb. You can also locate this in the windshield and in a number of other places. My preference usually is the door jamb, and the reason for that is at the top left you can see a date, and that's what's called the production date. The production date can play a vital role down the road with some of the service information. So I always try to note down the VIN number and grab that production date at the same time. Once we have that VIN number, we're going to need to use some kind of service information platform. Some of you may have already been exposed to a system called ProDemand. We're going to use ProDemand, but there are others out there. Okay, so I've logged into the ProDemand system, which is one of systems. There's others that are out there, but we're going to use this one today. And one of the recommendations that I have is to typically try to use the VIN number. This usually gives you the most specific information. And so what I do, that VIN number that we captured off of the door jamb on that vehicle, I'm going to put it in here as fast as I can type it in. It's usually not too bad. And then once I do that, I'm going to hit lookup, and that will give me the year, which is 2006, and that's a make is a Ford, and the model is a Freestyle. It also gives us some additional information. It's got a 3-liter engine in it, and it's an SE version. So once we get that information in, all we have to do is click use this vehicle, and now you have all the information listed that pertains to this vehicle. And there's a lot of information here that we could get into, but we're just going to focus on this worksheet today. So let's switch back and take a look at something. Okay, so the very first question that is listed on our worksheet, it says check service information for the specified method for retrieving diagnostic trouble codes on the OBD II vehicle being serviced on. And remember that there was OBD I, which was pre 2000 vehicles. So most of the cars that we'll be working on in the shop will be 2000 and newer. So let's go back to our service information system, the ProDemand, and take a look, see what we find. Well, the first thing I probably should do before we go out there is I got to grab a scan tool. So today I'm going to grab my tool, which is I have a Snap-on Zeus. But again, there's a lot of different scan tools that are out there, and they all have different capabilities. The most important thing is to make sure that it is capable of reading OBD II vehicles, which most scan tools that are out there will. At least read codes as a minimum, and then there's some other options with data and so forth I'll show you. Now back to that vehicle, I'm going to take a look. Now it's set on the left hand side, but I mean, looking at this vehicle, that's not exactly where I'm seeing it. If you look there, it's slightly to the right hand side of the brake pedal down there. kind of tucked away. It's black and it's not supposed to stand out. Obviously, you as the driver don't want to be staring at this connector all the time. But it indeed is there, and it wasn't too difficult to find. So now I need to connect my tool to it. So I'm going to put my, there it is. There's that connector. See how kind of tucked away it was to the right side? All right, so now I'm going to connect my diagnostic connector to this and turn the key on. So here's my my OBD II connector. Some are wired. This one happens to be Bluetooth, which is nice, so I don't have any wires connecting. Bad part about that is you don't want to forget it, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug this into that plug. It snaps right in, and turn the key on, and that'll allow me to start taking a look at codes. So on our worksheet, just so I clarify this, we need to check the box next to the 1 or put an X in there. And then the specified method for retrieving trouble codes is what was actually covered in our book. But we're going to have the key off. We're going to hook up our scan tool. We're going to turn the key on to be able to read the codes on it. In some cases, you can start the vehicle. More often than not, in most shops now, we try to put some kind of battery maintainer on there to maintain voltage so we're not generating heat, especially here in Southern California where it can be hot. Okay, so here we're looking at the screen that starts out on my scan tool, and I'm going to hit OBD Direct, and I'm going to click OBD Diagnose, and then I'm going to click Start Communication. Takes a minute. It's going to come back with some information about the protocol that the vehicle is, the ISO standard that it's built on. You'll see here in 1 second. There it is. Number of ECUs detected. There's more than 2, but this is OBD II. And then from here, you'll be able to see the different menu options that we have. Specifically for this task, we're going to be looking at the display trouble codes, but you can see on here there's some common features with OBD II, such as freeze frame data and other things. Once we click on the get codes, voila, there we go. There's our codes on the vehicle that we have, and one's in black simply because that was the most recent and it's the top of the list. It was selected. If I go back here, you'll be able to see that I can actually look at the freeze frame data, which will record the last fault that happened. So when I have multiple faults, I can determine which one actually caused them, or at least what was the most recent failure that the vehicle saw. And in this case, the data that comes back shows us the code here at the top, the 356 ignition coil, and then all the data parameters or PIDs that were related, what they were actually reading at the time of failure. So this can be very useful down the road. Now looking back at our worksheet, we can check number 2 box here, which had us unplugging something. We didn't have to do that in this case because we actually have a car with a problem. And you'll remember we had a P0356 code, and the P here indicates that that's a powertrain failure, and that is 0 is a generic code, versus if there was a 1 there, it would be a manufacturer specific code. So you might be wondering, okay, well, I got this code, what do I do? Well, that's what our service information systems are for, and we can go back to ProDemand to find out what the diagnostic steps are that are related to this code. So just so we all understand, back at the service information system, we'll punch in here the P0356 and we'll hit enter. And here you'll see that there's some search results again for this that are related to it and so forth. Again, I'm going to go under here. And you could see that it was related to the ignition system. And then it gives me the component location. And then down here, wiring diagrams for this, as well as the guided component testing. So we could go in here and it will tell us, what we're going to be doing. Here's the test that it wants us to look at. Looks like it's looking for a coil on plug test. So this is definitely related to the ignition system having a failure here, and it's going to give us all the steps that we need to go through, harness locations, and what we're actually looking at. And what tools that we might need or what options might be out there. It'll show you basics of how to hook it up, and it'll give you what they call a known good wave pattern that we might see on an ignition scope if we were to proceed with diagnosis of this vehicle. So for step 3 on our our sheet here, it says retrieve and record the stored diagnostic trouble code. So you can check that box 3, and then the code is the P0356. And then step 4 says using specified testing procedures, what system is at fault here. And we didn't need to really get into too much of the testing, but we can definitely tell it's an ignition system failure that is probably on that specific cylinder. So the P0356 is showing us a particular cylinder, but we would go through and we would check all of those. And so it says on step 5, what's the necessary action at this point? So the necessary action would be we'd have to go through the test procedures to isolate what component within the ignition system is actually at fault on this vehicle. And that could be a bad ignition coil, a bad spark plug, could be bad wiring. It actually could have something that's seems kind of unrelated. It could be something that's like too rich or too lean of a fuel mixture that's causing some kind of misfire. So we'd have to go through those steps to figure it out. So the code is only part of the solution when a car comes into a shop. And sometimes people have this, I guess, notion that all we do is hook up a scan tool and that fixes the car, and that often is only the beginning of the diagnostic process. All right, so switching back to our vehicle here on the scan tool, I just wanted to show everyone real quick. If we'd fixed it, we would click on the clear emission related data. So this is the clear code option. We want to get rid of the codes. We've repaired the vehicle. We've taken care of the problem. We need to erase the fault memory at this point. Now, you don't usually want to do that in the beginning because you don't want to lose any information that might be important to diagnosing it. And then once we go in, we're going to hit continue here. Tells us to try it with the key on, engine off. If that doesn't work, try it with the engine running. Different cars behave a little differently. It says here it's been cleared. I'm going to go in and just double check those codes, and you can see here it says no codes present. So at this point, that vehicle is being shipped, if it were repaired, with a clear fault memory for the customer. So at this point, you should have been able to fill in the 5 questions that were part of that worksheet. Make sure you save it, and then you will be able to upload it for this week's lab assignment. Make sure that your name is on it, make sure the dates are on it, make sure it's filled out in entirety, because if it's not, I will send it back and you will have to make corrections in order to receive credit. I hope you were able to follow along with that pretty well. I hope that was a good overview for you to see a scan tool in action on a vehicle if you haven't had any experience with one before. And trust me, we get much more involved in those systems down the road later as you get into more specifics classes here at Automotive. Okay, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.